All right, so are you ready to dive into some seriously spicy college football takes?
Oh, I'm always up for a good deep dive into the world of hot takes and fan reactions.
Yeah, and we've got some prime material today. Two articles that basically put ESPN analyst Kirk Herbstreit right in the middle of the college football playoff controversy.
Oh, Herbstreet. He's definitely got a knack for sparking those passionate debates.
Yeah, he really does, and it's not even a new thing, right? Like remember back in 2018 when he basically dismissed undefeated UCF, so their schedule wasn't strong enough for a playoff spot.
Right, right. And then last year it was all about Alabama getting in over undefeated Florida State.
Yeah, and those were just the warm-ups. I think this year's takes were even more interesting, shall we say. Especially with Indiana making the playoffs. They went 11-1, lost to Notre Dame in the first round, and Herbstreit just doubled down on that whole they shouldn't have been their stance.
Oh yeah. And then the real kicker, the moment that really sent the internet into a frenzy was when he and Nick Saban actually suggested Miami should have been in the playoff instead of Indiana.
Oh yeah.
But the irony, of course, Miami ends up losing the Pop-Tarts Bowl,
Oh.
while Herbstreit's supposed top contender Alabama loses to a five-loss Michigan team.
Oh man, the fans did not let that one slide, especially over on Reddit's CFB community.
Oh no, they were all over it. Pretty much everyone agreed that Herbstreit has a pro-SEC bias, especially when it comes to Alabama.
Oh yeah, and some of the comments were gold. Like one user said, if an SEC darling loses in conference play, it's because the SEC is just that tough. But if they lose out of conference or in a bowl game, well, it's because they didn't want to be there.
Oh, the Schrodinger's SEC concept.
Yeah.
Always a classic. Can't lose unless they choose to.
Exactly. Another one I saw was the SEC has never lost a bowl game that they wanted to be there for. Like, it's so over the top, but it also kind of perfectly captures that diehard SEC fandom.
Right, it's all in good fun, of course, but it does highlight how deeply ingrained some of these narratives can be in college football.
Yeah, and they go beyond just a single commentator or network, right?
Okay.
It fuels those larger discussions about conference strength and the whole playoff selection process.
Absolutely.
And in the middle of all this, Herbstreet decides to hop on X, formerly Twitter, to respond to a fan who called him out on his pro-Alabama stance, tells the guy to keep believing the false narratives, clown.
Ooh, that response right there is where things start to get really fascinating because by just dismissing any criticism as false narratives, he's kind of playing right into that perception of bias that people have.
Yeah.
Comes across as defensive and almost unwilling to acknowledge another viewpoint.
Yeah, and this isn't a one-time thing either, right? This seems to be a bit of a pattern with him. He makes these bold predictions, and then when they don't pan out, he deflects any criticism. Like, remember back in 2021 when he was so adamant that undefeated Cincinnati wouldn't make the CFP?
Yeah, that one definitely stuck with a lot of people. And it brings up a really interesting point about the role of ego in sports commentary. Like when these commentators get too invested in being right instead of being open to different perspectives, it can really damage their credibility and alienate their audience.
Yeah, and don't even get me started on the Florida State fans. Last year, he went toe-to-toe with them, pushing the idea that they didn't deserve a playoff spot despite being undefeated. And now this season, he and ESPN practically absolved themselves of any responsibility for contributing to that narrative.
It's almost a textbook case of how these narratives can shift based on the outcome.
Mhm.
Like when it's convenient, an undefeated record is enough for a playoff spot. But when it's not, suddenly other factors become more important.
And you know the internet never forgets, right? Someone dug up a tweet from Herbstreet back in 2014 where he said, "So long as you keep winning and finish in the top four, nothing else matters." Well, clearly, things have changed since then.
Oh, the receipts. It really shows the power of social media to hold people accountable for their past statements. Much harder these days to change your tune without someone calling you out on it.
Absolutely. And that whole false narratives defense backfired big time on X because of that community notes feature.
Ah, yes. Community notes. A brilliant example of how technology can be used to challenge these narratives and present a more balanced perspective.
Yeah, so for those not familiar, it allows users to add context to posts, and someone added a note to Herbstreit's tweet that basically listed every single time he contradicted his own stance on playoff criteria.
It's a great example of how fans are becoming more empowered to actively engage with the information they're consuming and hold these features accountable.
So we've got this whole saga of Herbstreit's controversial commentary, some very passionate and often hilarious fan reactions, but what does it all really mean?
Well, it certainly highlights how closely connected sports commentary and fan reactions have become, especially in the age of social media. But it also goes much deeper than that,
Hmm.
makes us question the role of commentators and their impact on public perception.
Are they simply analysts? Or are they actively shaping the narratives we hear about teams and players? What are their motivations? And how do those motivations influence their commentary?
Exactly. These are all crucial questions to consider as we navigate this ever-evolving world of sports media.
Okay, so we've established there's a lot to unpack here. This whole situation with Herbstreet and the fan reactions really gives us a peek behind the curtain of sports commentary, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's like we're getting a glimpse into the inner workings of this whole ecosystem where personal opinions, network agendas, and fan expectations all collide.
And of course, we can't forget the role of social media in amplifying those fan reactions and giving them a platform to directly engage with commentators and challenge their viewpoints. It's like a whole new level of interaction.
It's really changed the game. It's no longer a one-way street where commentators dictate the narrative. Fans now have the power to push back, offer their own perspectives, and even hold these figures accountable for what they say.
Yeah, it's like the democratization of sports commentary. And speaking of democratization, you mentioned power dynamics earlier. Can you elaborate on that a bit? Is there some kind of unspoken hierarchy within sports media?
Well, it's not so much a formal hierarchy as a complex web of relationships and influences.
Mm.
You've got the networks like ESPN who have a vested interest in promoting certain conferences or teams, and that can put pressure on commentators to, let's say, align with the company line, even if it conflicts with their personal opinions.
So are you suggesting that Herbstreit might not actually believe everything he's saying? Is it all just a performance for ratings and to please the network executives?
Well, it's impossible to know for sure what's going on in someone's head, but it's certainly a possibility worth considering. There's a lot at stake in the world of sports broadcasting. Money, prestige, influence. It wouldn't be realistic to think those factors don't play a role in shaping the commentary we hear.
So we've got networks potentially pushing their own agendas, commentators maybe feeling pressure to conform, and fans bringing their own passionate opinions to the table. Is there any hope for objectivity in sports commentary at all?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think it's important to remember that objectivity exists on a spectrum. It's not an all-or-nothing concept. Even the most well-intentioned commentator will have their own biases and experiences that shape their perspective. The key is to be aware of those biases, to be transparent about them, and to be open to considering different viewpoints.
So more self-awareness from commentators and fewer false narratives defenses. I think that's something we can all get behind. But what about the fans? What role did they play in all of this?
Fans are absolutely crucial to this whole ecosystem. They're the ones driving those ratings, generating the buzz, and ultimately determining the success of networks and commentators. But they also have a responsibility to be critical consumers of sports media. Don't just blindly accept everything you hear. Do your own research, question assumptions, and engage in thoughtful discussions.
So it's not just about cheering for your team. It's about being an informed and engaged participant in this whole world of sports media. I love that. It's like we're all part of this massive, sometimes chaotic conversation about college football.
Exactly. And that conversation is what makes it so engaging. It's a constant back and forth, a clash of opinions, and ultimately a celebration of the passion we all share for this sport.
So it sounds like we need to be a bit more savvy,
Right.
a bit more aware of the forces at play behind those commentator sound bites. It's not just about taking their word for it, right?
Exactly. Remember, sports commentary, while entertaining, also has the power to influence opinions and even decisions. Be aware of the potential motivations behind the commentary. Think critically about the information you're consuming, and don't be afraid to join the conversation. Your voice matters.
That's a powerful message, and I think it's a perfect place to wrap up our deep dive today. Thanks for joining us as we explore this fascinating world of college football commentary. And next time you hear Kirk Herbstreit making a bold prediction, remember to take a moment to consider all the factors at play before jumping on the bandwagon.
Yeah, it's about being an educated fan, really. Understanding that there's more going on behind the scenes than just someone's love for a particular team or conference.
So it's like we're not just watching the games anymore, we're analyzing the analysts.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so interesting. It adds a whole new layer to how we engage with college football. We're not just passively consuming information, we're actively dissecting it and forming our own conclusions.
It's like we've unlocked a secret level of fandom.
In a way, yes. And with platforms like X formerly, Twitter fans have more power than ever to voice their opinions and hold these commentators accountable.
We saw that with the whole community notes situation. It's a powerful tool for adding context and challenging narratives that might not be entirely accurate.
It's a game changer, for sure. And it's a reminder that we as fans have a role to play in shaping the conversation around college football.
So, to bring it all back to Kirk Herbstreit, what do you think is the main takeaway from all this?
I think it's a reminder that even the most prominent voices in sports media are fallible. They have their biases, their agendas, and their own unique ways of interpreting the game.
And it's up to us as fans to be aware of those factors and to engage with their commentary in a critical and thoughtful way.
Exactly. Don't just blindly accept everything you hear. Do your own research, question assumptions, and form your own opinions.
It's about being an informed and engaged fan, and ultimately that's what makes the world of college football so captivating.
It's a passionate community full of diverse perspectives and lively debates, and that's what keeps us coming back for more year after year.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us as we explored this fascinating world of college football commentary and fan reactions.
It's been a pleasure.
And remember, deep divers, the next time you hear Kirk Herbstreit, or any other commentator for that matter, making a bold prediction, take a moment to consider all the forces at play. Don't just take their word for it, engage with the conversation, form your own opinions, and enjoy the ride.